I'd like to just start talking to my panel and start with the CEO of the Mauritius Stock Exchange, Sunhil to my left, and really talk to him about what's happening in his part of the world, and also discuss the issue of the entire capital markets environment, because he is the chairperson of the Africa Stock Exchange Association. So now, could you give us an idea of what's happening in Mauritius, first of all, just on your particular part of neck of the woods?
Thank you, Savannah. Good morning, everybody. I'm indeed pleased to be here. And as far as Mauritius is concerned, and the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, I think the last 12 months have been essentially focused on the internationalization of the stock exchange platform in Mauritius. In fact, the Stock Exchange of Mauritius has a history of about 20 years. And during the first 20 years of its history, I think it's been an exchange which has essentially focused on domestic capital raising and domestic listing. What we've realized is that with Mauritius trying to position itself as a service platform for emerging regions of the world, namely India and Africa, I think the time has come for the exchange to move up the value chain of services that we're offering and come up with new ideas, and this is why we've been busy trying to internationalize our platform. So I'm just going to mention a few of the initiatives that we've taken over the last few months so as to achieve this internationalization process. First, we set up about a few months ago a multi-currency listing, trading, and settlement platform, which would allow the Stock Exchange of Mauritius to list, trade, and settle different financial products in US dollar, in euro, and GBP. So by doing that, we become the first exchange in the African exchange space that would allow an African issuer or an emerging market issuer to come and raise capital through the exchange platform in Mauritius, list and trade and settle. What this means is basically, you know, as Duncan has mentioned before, there's a lot of interest for Africa for several reasons. And we expect that as Africa grows, many of the African issuers will be trying to tap the international investment community for capital. And there's definitely going to be a lot of interest from the international investment community, because Africa is the last frontier growth and is growing at 5–6%. And people we know are looking for investment opportunities outside of the traditional markets. But what they don't really like is being exposed to the local currency, being exposed to the risks of the different currencies in the different African regions. So in Mauritius, we offer a sort of alternative to that. We give them the opportunity to, we give the African issuers the opportunity to tap the international investment community by issuing securities in different international currencies, and this provides the hedge. So we've been working on that. Another very important initiative that we've taken is we realized that Mauritius today is growingly being used as a platform for India and for other emerging regions, and we've seen a growing number of global funds and global business companies being set up in Mauritius. So we think that these issuers could be it in the global, as global business funds or global business companies, could be potential issuers on our market. So we've come up with a listing framework that is very compelling and attractive for these global business companies and global funds. And over the last 6 months, we've listed 12 international global funds on our exchange. So basically, our whole focus as far as the Stock Exchange of Mauritius is concerned is to go international. Come up with rules, come up with a framework, come up with a kind of platform that will be compelling and attractive to the emerging issuers, namely in Africa and elsewhere. So that has been our focus over the last few months as far as Mauritius is concerned.
So it seems to me that you've grown from the last year that you were here quite a few opportunities. Yes. But what are the challenges that you're finding?
As far as Mauritius is concerned, or Africa in general?
Both.
Well, as far as Mauritius is concerned, I think our main challenges currently is essentially from an economic standpoint. Mauritius has had a development strategy which over the last few years has been essentially Eurocentric. And we have all realized, be it at the government level or at the private sector level, that with the crisis in Europe unfolding right now, and with absence of visibility in terms of how long this crisis is going to last, it's very important for us to try to shift our strategy and try to move to new markets. So basically the government strategy in Mauritius is to open up to new emerging regions of the world. I'm talking about India, China, but of course Africa is part of the whole spectrum of new markets that we're trying to aim at. And the private sector too has realized that, so we're busy trying to diversify into new markets. And in spite of the crisis that is, unfolding in Europe right now, we've managed to keep growth in Mauritius around 3%. But unfortunately, we're used to a growth environment of about 5 and 6. So, of course, this is putting pressure now on the authorities to try to shift their strategy and try to move away from what has historically been a Eurocentric strategy. Regarding Africa, I think with what is going on in the rest of the world, as Duncan was saying, I think it's Africa's time right now. There's a lot of interest from international investors for Africa. And just to highlight what Africa represents, I would like to quote some statistics that I've seen recently published by the IMF in its 2012 Wealth Report, where they're comparing the top 10 economies of the world in 2011 on a purchasing power parity basis, GDP in trillions of dollars, and what will happen in 2050, which is only 40 years down the road. So in terms of top 10 economies right now, you have the US, of course, which is the number one with a $15 trillion GDP on a purchasing power parity basis, followed by China, and then Japan, and then you have the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, and the European economies. But when you look at the story that will unfold in the next 20 to 40 years, amazingly, first of all, the United States is toppled from its number one position, and it's India that becomes the number one economy on a purchasing power parity basis, followed by China. But the good story is that on the top 10 list, there are 2 African countries. There is Nigeria, which, if I still recall the statistics, by 2050 will have an $11 trillion economy on a purchasing power parity basis. And another African country will be Egypt, which I think was number 9 or 10 on the list, with a $6 or $7 trillion GDP, and none of the existing European countries that were on the top 10 figure on the top 10 list. So basically, the message is very strong. I think we are witnessing what I call a fundamental shift in the world economy right now, and I think Africa will have a very important role to play to support the growth in China, to support the growth in India. I think African resources will be very much sought after, and I think that's why it's Africa's time now. And just to finish, I think to really tap the potential of African countries, I think capital markets will need to have a very important role to play in that.